So as everyone knows, the 2019-2020 NHL season has been put on hold for this whole, how do I not get this video taken down? Quarantine. Because of this whole quarantine thing. And the NHL has not yet decided that it wants to cancel the season. Neither has the NBA, MLB, or really any other sports seasons that were affected by this. Except the AHL, which, go Checkers, they have the cup for another season, technically. What is going around the rumor mill is that there's going to be a 24-team format for the NHL Stanley Cup playoffs for the 2020 season. So, I'm going to take a deep dive into each matchup and see, who's going to win the Stanley Cup if we were to have a 24-team playoff. So, welcome to the video. Alright, so this 24-team playoff will include 4 play-ins to get to the second round. So the first round will be a best-of-3 play-in. So I'm going to do the play-ins first, I'm going to go back and then do each round by round. Alright, so the first play-in in the West, we have the Calgary Flames versus the Winnipeg Jets. I think this is based on points percentage because the Calgary Flames are, I believe, in third in the Pacific right now, and it wouldn't really make sense as to why they're here. But I think they're doing it in not a divisional format, but a conference format, and anything that matches up is just coincidence. So, the Calgary Flames and the Winnipeg Jets. The Winnipeg Jets have virtually no defense. They've actually been playing really well this season offensively, and Connor Hellebuyck has just been absolutely insanely good. Now, on the other hand, the Flames have kind of struggled this season with the whole Bill Peters situation and what happened there, getting a new coach, going on a hot streak, and then just kind of being okay from there on out. Now, I don't pay attention to these two teams very in depth. I do pay attention to the Winnipeg Jets a little bit more than I do the Calgary Flames, simply because they're in the Preds division. Now, I think it's tough to say with this matchup because both teams are relatively good, and I just think overall in a 3-game series, this would be very hard fought. It's 2 Western Canadian teams pit against each other, and I just think it's going to be a hard-fought battle. But I think in the end, Winnipeg Jets, if Connor Hellebuyck can do his best, I just don't trust Cam Talbot or David Rittich quite yet, especially with the way I think it was the 3rd Oilers game went, with the whole goalie fight and all that kind of stuff. I just don't think that the Flames have what it takes. As much as I'd love to see a Flames-Oilers series, I think Winnipeg moves on so that they play St. Louis Blues. Now, in the next play-in is the Edmonton Oilers and the Chicago Blackhawks. Of course, the Chicago Blackhawks somehow find a way to make it. I believe it's been maybe 2 seasons since they've been in, or maybe even 3 seasons since they've been in the playoffs. I'm not entirely sure, but I know for a fact that the Nashville Predators were the last team to oust them in the playoffs. They have had a decent season. Most of it relied on the fact that Robin Leonard was playing out of his mind. He's now in Vegas, and I don't really know who their backup is. Corey Crawford, he has experience in the playoffs, and so does most of that team, but it's still a fairly young team, so I don't know how well they're going to do. The Oilers team has been really good this season. They have some depth issues on, I believe it's the wings. They have pretty good centermen. If they can split up McDavid and Draisaitl, I think that they have a pretty good shot at it. And if they can return to playing the way they did during the middle of the season, I think they have a pretty good shot. The Oilers have been in a playoff spot for most of the season, whereas Chicago has been kind of like up and down all season. And because of that, I think the Edmonton Oilers will win this series. And it may come down to experience, but it's only a 3-game series, so I really do think that the Edmonton Oilers will oust the Blackhawks, and the Blackhawks will once again lose in the first round. So the Oilers will go on to play the Dallas Stars. The third play-in is the Vancouver Canucks and the Arizona Coyotes. This is a weird series because both these teams kind of were iffy all season. Now, both have had pretty good goaltending from their number 1 starter, which is Kemper for the Coyotes and Jacob Markstrom for the Canucks. Assuming that neither one of them have had surgery, because I've heard nothing about either having major surgery during this downtime, and they're both back and healthy, this could be a really, really good series. Earlier in the season, the Coyotes mixed it up a bunch with the Flames, and we know that they have the skill at least at the top end. They're very top heavy. I don't think they have that much depth. They have a lot of playoff experience because how many Blackhawks are on the team. So they at least have that. If Kemper can keep up what he's doing, then I don't think they'll have a problem winning at least one game. And the same goes for the Canucks. Both are very top-heavy teams with some depth. I think the Canucks have better depth. But this one's a difficult series to call. I do think the high-end talent on Vancouver is better, but I do think the goaltending on Arizona is better. I think Kemper's a little bit better than Markstrom. I don't have the immediate statistics about how they did against each other this season up right now. But, see, this is a tough one to call. I think this is probably the best series in the West, potentially. The Winnipeg-Calgary series also has potential to be really good, but I think this one might be better just due to the goaltending battle that could be. I think this would be a very defensive series. I know the Coyotes aren't known for scoring all that much. Just due to the better high-end talent on the offense on the Canucks, I'm going to say the Canucks go on to beat the Coyotes. And they're going to go on and play the Golden Knights. Now, the last play-in is the Nashville Predators and the Minnesota Wild. And if you've watched this channel for any amount of time, I'm a huge Nashville Predators fan. I mean, they're my number one team. My number two team being the New Jersey Devils. They're not in this, of course, because they've been bad all season. But the Nashville Predators and the Minnesota Wild have had a complicated relationship over the last few years. Either Nashville crushes them, or they get crushed. There's really no in between. And with the way Pekka Rinne has played this year, I don't know if they can trust them. And UC Saros, though he's a good goaltender, coming off of such a long break, I don't know if the goaltending tandem of UC Saros and Pekka Rinne will be able to hold down the fort. And with the way the Predators were playing, they're on the upswing. I believe they had a 3-game winning streak before the quarantine. They were hitting on all cylinders on offense, and they could play pretty well defensively. They did get killed. Not they didn't get killed, but they did get beaten by the Wild a little bit before this whole quarantine started. But it's weird. I don't want to sound biased, but I know who I want to pick, and I'm kind of going with my heart that way. I just think the Predators have better high-end talent. They have better goaltending. Devin Dubnyk has been pretty good this season, I think. I mean, he's pretty standard. But the Wild have been known to not do anything in the playoffs. The one season they did, I believe they beat the Colorado Avalanche, and then I don't think they made it much further than that. The Preds have playoff experience. They have older guys with lots of playoff experience, and I think in a best of 3, I think the Nashville Predators will be able to pull out the win there. A little bit of my bias is showing, of course, but I don't know. I just think that the Predators have better defensive talent, and I think they have better offensive talent overall, especially with the loss of Jason Zucker for the Minnesota Wild. So, I mean, Kevin Fiala might, pull out all his revenge cards on the Predators. Who knows? Now, in the East, the first play-in will be the Columbus Blue Jackets and the New York Islanders, and they will be battling to play the Boston Bruins. Like I said, this is a best-of-3 series. The Columbus Blue Jackets have kind of not been healthy all season. So we really have no idea what a healthy Blue Jackets team looks like. If everyone comes back and everyone's healthy, this team has the potential of being really good, but I think it all depends on their goaltenders. If Merzlikins can come back, and maybe he even takes a job from Korpisalo, I think they're going to play Korpisalo the first game, and if they lose, I think Merzlikins comes in, and then it's a shot in the dark from there. Merzlikins has no playoff experience. Korpisalo, I don't believe, has much, if any. I don't think he has any. This would be the first time he would go in starting. Same with during a playoff series. Whereas they've had Sergei Bobrovsky for God knows how long going back, and the New York Islanders came off of a sweep last season against a 2-time Stanley Cup champion team in the Pittsburgh Penguins in the first round. So it's tough to say. I think if everyone comes back healthy and everyone comes back, ready and raring to go, it could go either way. It could be a high-scoring series on one side. It could be a really low-scoring series. I don't really think we'll have anything in between. I could see a 1-0 game. I could see an 8-5 game. Ultimately, I think because of the goaltending in New York is a little bit better and a little bit more stable, I think the New York Islanders are going to pull this one out against the Columbus Blue Jackets. Columbus, they heavily relied on their overtime losses this season, so I think they had 15 of them. I don't think they'll be able to get it done. This is not a points race. This is purely wins. So I think the New York Islanders will go on and play the Boston Bruins. Now the next one is really interesting because I don't think it's been a while since these two teams faced each other in the playoffs, and I know the one team hasn't been in the playoffs in a couple of years, whereas Pittsburgh two has won two in a row in the last think 4 years. The Montreal Canadiens and the Pittsburgh Penguins will be playing a 3-game series in order to play the Philadelphia Flyers. Now, the Pittsburgh Penguins have been riddled with injuries this season and have still somehow stayed afloat. But they had kind of dropped off once, everyone was kind of back in and they're getting in tune. I think just because it's Sidney Crosby and Evgeny Malkin, I just can't see a scenario where the Canadiens win. I don't. Also, slight bias here because I want to see Pittsburgh versus Philadelphia because we're not going to get the Edmonton-Calgary series on the other side. The Battle of the Keystone State is always a good one, especially in the playoffs, especially in a 7-game series. Philadelphia is hungry. They were really, really good coming out, coming into the quarantine. And Montreal, they're barely hanging on by the skin of their teeth. So I don't think that they're going to even win a game. I think it's going to be a clean sweep by the Pittsburgh Penguins, 2-0. And they're going to go play the Philadelphia Flyers. I would like there to be a little bit of fight in Montreal. I just don't think that's going to happen. Pittsburgh, you just can't bet against them. It's hard. Third of the Eastern Conference play-in games is the New York Rangers and the Toronto Maple Leafs. Now, the New York Rangers were really starting to heat up at the end of the season, and they were playing really, really good hockey. Mika Zibanejad led the charge by scoring 5 goals in a game, I believe, a couple weeks before the quarantine happened. And he's just been a man possessed. Artemi Panarin's been really good this season. I think he had 80 points. Their new goaltending tandem, which doesn't include Henrik Lundqvist, which I believe would change in this scenario because of his playoff experience. I think having him on the team would be fantastic for the rest of the team. There's some playoff experience still there. Mika Zibanejad, he was. I think he made it to the second round a couple years ago, and they played the Ottawa Senators. I don't remember who they beat, but I believe they made it to the second round so that they could play the Ottawa Senators. There's some recent playoff experience here and there. Artemi Panarin coming off of a decent run, the best run in team history over Columbus. He was firing on all cylinders. I think if everyone comes back healthy, I think they have a good chance. Whereas the Toronto Maple Leafs have had a horrendous season by their standards. They have much better top-end talent. I think overall, or at least say 5 good, amazing players, and New York has maybe 3 or 4. Maybe 2 or 3. Really, it's up to you on what you interpret. I know Zibanejad and Panarin are definitely up there. If you want to include Lundqvist, you can. But Toronto's really struggled, especially in the goaltending department this season. Frederik Andersen has been good. It's been more their backup situation. They have no toughness, and whereas New York does, I think if New York could beat Toronto into submission, like a lot of teams have done, then I think New York could pull out the win. But if they want to play a strike game where you just go down and score, you try to score as many as you can, I think Toronto comes out on top. So I think it really depends on the type of game, and I think New York has a good enough coach to where he can kind of put out either game, because New York, I believe, still has Michael Haley and Brandon Lemieux. He could definitely beat Toronto in submission. And then the other goalie, who's the New York goalie, whose name escapes me, he has Toronto's number, and he has for the past couple seasons. It really depends on who New York decides to play and what kind of game they decide to play, because Toronto cannot keep up with they cannot roll with the punches like a lot of the other teams in this league can. So I don't want to do this, but I think New York pulls out the win against Toronto. I think they beat them in a 2-1 in its 3-game series. I just don't. I think New York would probably lose the first game, and then because they're going to try to trade back and forth, and I think maybe it'd be like a 7-6, 5-4 game. And then I think that New York just starts beating Toronto into submission, and I just think New York comes out of that, especially with the way they were playing at the end of the season, when the season came to a halt. Finally, the last play-in is the Carolina Hurricanes and the Florida Panthers. This is a lot like the Pittsburgh and Canadiens series. I don't think that the goaltending for the Panthers are good enough. Sergei Bobrovsky, if he were to come back and be Sergei Bobrovsky, he's never been able to take a team further than the first round more than once. And that was last year, and they just happened to beat the Tampa Bay Lightning because the Tampa Bay Lightning were just they just had, everything came so easy to them. Like, they just almost seemed like they didn't try. Carolina's fought for this all season, and I don't think they're going to give up. Peter Mrazek is going to come back, and he's just going to be a monster in net. And again, Carolina's one of those teams that can roll with the punches. They can play a physical game. They can play a fast game. They can score on you. They can defend. I don't see a way Florida wins this series. So, I think it's going to be a sweep, like the Pittsburgh Montreal series, but I do think Carolina comes out on top of this one pretty handily. So on the first official round, or the second round after the play-ins, which would be the Winnipeg Jets and the St. Louis Blues, which I believe is a rematch of last year's series. St. Louis was the best team in the West all season. You can't argue with that. They have not suffered from a Stanley Cup hangover. They were a little iffy there in the mid part of the season, but then they kind of slowly regained. They were so far ahead of the rest of the Western Conference that it just didn't even matter. Their defense is solid. Their offense is solid. They have a new weapon in Justin Falk as an offensive defenseman on a power play. I've heard he hasn't been playing that well. He's not great defensively. I mean, I could have told you that from just watching Carolina last year. He's really fallen off from where he used to be. But I still think he's an asset in the playoffs, or he can be, because it's just a different game. Whereas Winnipeg has absolutely no defense, and they're all offense. Connor Hellebuyck has been standing on his head, but he did that last year, and St. Louis still found a way to get past him, and I think it's going to happen again. I think St. Louis takes it in 6 games this year, and I think they're going to move on to the next round. So this next round is very interesting. It's the Dallas Stars and the Edmonton Oilers. And I think this is an interesting series because both teams are very... I don't think you could find two teams that are more opposite from each other. The Dallas Stars are just this heavy defensive team, whereas the Edmonton Oilers, they're fast, they're quick, they're skilled. I'm not saying that the Dallas Stars aren't skilled, but I think they're going to have to find a way to contain the quickness of the Edmonton Oilers. Now, I don't think they've struggled with that too much this year. I'm not sure. Again, I don't have that pulled up right now, but it would be an interesting series for sure. I definitely think it goes all the way to 7. It sure would be a travesty for Connor McDavid to go out that early, wouldn't it? Dallas they can come back on you. I mean, you can get up 2 or 3 goals. I mean, as the Predators did in the Winter Classic, and then they'll be right back with you. If you let your guard down for a second, the Dallas Stars can strike very fast. Whereas Edmonton, they have Connor McDavid and Leon Draisaitl, 2 of the best players in the NHL. One of them, I think one of them reached 100, and I know both of them were going to have over 100 by the end of the season. So really, it's defense versus offense. Does defense actually win championships? I don't think it will in this scenario. It's very hard to hold Connor McDavid and Leon Draisaitl for that many games in a row. So I think the Edmonton Oilers will ultimately defeat the Dallas Stars in 7 games. It's gonna be a good series. It's gonna be two very different teams playing against each other, and they're both gonna have to adjust. I think Edmonton though can adjust a little bit better than Dallas can. But I guess we'll have to see. But I do think Edmonton will win that series. Next up, we have the Vancouver Canucks and the Las Vegas Golden Knights. The Vegas Golden Knights have had a pretty good season. They climbed to the top of the Pacific and then kind of were on a down point. I think they lost 3 games in a row and fired their coach. I don't get it. Whatever. Pete DeBoer's at the helm now, and they were playing pretty well going into the quarantine. This is a hard one to call. Both teams are very good offensively and have the biggest if for Vancouver is if Jacob Markstrom can keep up his high-end play, they will have no problem keeping up with the Golden Knights. If they can't, they're going to get swept. And with the lack of playoff experience on that end, whereas the Golden Knights have had a lot of experience, it's tough to call again because the Canucks would have just played, whereas Golden Knights have not played yet. The Canucks have played at least 2 games, whereas the Golden Knights have not played at all. So maybe rest will be on the Golden Knights side, maybe playing will be on the Canucks side, but ultimately I think Marc-Andre Fleury will out-goaltend Jacob Markstrom, leading the Golden Knights to a 6-game series win over the Vancouver Canucks. Rematch for the 2018 first round of the Nashville Predators and the Colorado Avalanche. So the Colorado Avalanche and Nashville Predators have met each other a couple times this season, and one of them did not go so very well. Nashville Predators let up, I believe, 6 goals in some ridiculously short amount of time, and ultimately lost the game 9-4. But I do believe they did come back and beat the Avalanche once or twice this season. Avalanche are a lot better than they were when the Preds last saw them. They have players like Nazem Kadri and Andrei Burakovsky. That just adds to their depth. They can play a physical game. They can play a speed game. I think they're much better than the Nashville Predators, especially when healthy. If the Predators can return to the way they played in 2017, which is a lot to ask of them, because it's almost a completely different team, then I think they have a chance. But ultimately, I think the Colorado Avalanche, just because one, they have the Preds number, 2, they're faster, 3, they're a little bit better at defense, and 4, I think their goaltender. Oh, I forgot about their goaltending. Their goaltender is Philip Grubauer, who, don't get me wrong, is a great goaltender. But if we remember when the Cavs went to the playoffs, he lost, I believe, 2 straight games to the Columbus Blue Jackets, and then Braden Holtby came in, and then. What if Philip Grubauer does that again? Philip Grubauer, who is his backup? No one of really any note. Though he did play well for them this season. I know that. He has been out, so at least they have a decent backup. But I don't know if that backup will be able to get them through a round against a team like the Nashville Predators. If the Preds can just play like they did in the second half of the season, I think they could beat the Avalanche, but if they don't, I think the Avalanche can beat them. This is probably the biggest toss-up in the West. Or probably the second biggest toss-up and then because there's Dallas and Edmonton. I think it goes 7 games, and I think the Colorado Avalanche will ultimately prevail. If Grubauer is on, Grubauer is really, really good. As much as I hate it, I think the Colorado Avalanche will move on. Alright, so back to the East. The New York Islanders versus the Boston Bruins. Alright, now to the East. The Boston Bruins and the New York Islanders. So, this could be a very good series. But again, Boston has been the best team in the National Hockey League. Their defense has been outstanding. Their offense is outstanding. Their goaltending has been amazing. Whereas the Islanders can't really score all that much. And their defense is pretty good. They've pretty good shot suppression, I believe. Their goaltending's been okay. But it's mainly their defense that's their main component. I think the Boston Bruins can pick about any team they want apart. And because of that, I don't think this is as much of a toss-up as I thought it was, especially with New York already playing 2 or 3 games against the Columbus Blue Jackets. I think the freshness of the Boston Bruins will be beneficial to them. They hit harder, they skate faster, they're more skilled than the Islanders, so I think the Boston Bruins are going to take this in probably 5 games against the New York Islanders. The Battle of the Keystone State is our next matchup, and it's Philadelphia versus Pittsburgh. Now, Pittsburgh at this point will have played at least 2 games, and Philadelphia will be coming off of lots of rest. Philadelphia going into the quarantine was, like I said earlier, fantastic. Pittsburgh was kind of wobbling a bit. They're having a bit of goalie controversy. Should they play Matt Murray? Should they play Tristan Jarry? And the Flyers have found a revelation in Carter Hart. He was playing really well. Brian Elliott's been playing really well. Both teams have really good goaltending. Both teams have great offenses. Both teams have great defensive and both defenses, and both teams are hungry for a Stanley Cup. More so the Flyers than the Penguins, because the Penguins' window is closing. Drew and Voracek are, though I believe they play different positions, are a lot like Malkin and Crosby. Both are very good. Both have been around for a long time, and both have led them to pretty damn close to the promised land on the Flyers side, whereas the Penguins have won 3 cups with Malkin and Crosby. I think the defense is a little bit more solid on Philadelphia than it is on Pittsburgh, but I don't think either are spectacular defenses. Ivan Provorov has been fantastic this season. He's a really good offensive defenseman. Chris Letang has had a rebound season. Both teams are actually, to me, built very similarly. I think the Penguins have better young talent than the Flyers do, but I mean, with the way they played at the end of that before the quarantine, I mean, it seems like anything can happen with this series. It's a huge toss-up. It's probably going to be the best in the playoffs, especially with the battle, the Keystone State in mind. These teams are supposed to hate each other. It's going to be very raw emotions. I hope it goes to 7 games. And like I said earlier, can you really bet against Crosby and Malkin? I don't think so. So I think in 7 games, I think the Pittsburgh Penguins are ultimately going to be the more successful of the two teams. So in the 3rd round, we'll get Boston and Pittsburgh. I just don't think Flyers have as good of a team as Pittsburgh does. But it really depends on the Pittsburgh goaltending. And it really depends on the Flyer goaltending. I just think Pittsburgh is just a little bit better. Next up, we have the Tampa Bay Lightning and the New York Rangers. I hesitated moving the Rangers on, so I'm going to hesitate even giving them a series. I think in 5 games it's going to be over. I think the Tampa Bay Lightning are going to just absolutely crush the New York Rangers. Tampa Bay has a lot to prove, especially after getting swept by Columbus last year. I don't think they're going to get... it's going to be hard for anyone to beat them this year. So I think in 5 games, Tampa Bay takes it. They have better offense, better defense, better goaltending. They have the experience, and I think just everything points to a Tampa Bay. And they have something to prove. I just think everything points to a Tampa Bay victory there. Finally, the last round will be the Washington Capitals and the Carolina Hurricanes. Last year, the Hurricanes beat the Capitals. I don't think the Hurricanes are nearly as good as they were last year. I think last year, in complete honesty, I think the 2019 season was a complete fluke. And I think the Washington Capitals are going to beat them in 6. Washington's just better. They have been better all season. They had a couple blips. Braden Holtby has not been himself this season, but when he is himself, then they're very good. And I think Samsonov has been fantastic this season. Reimer and Mrazek aren't nearly as good a tandem as them, and if Braden Holtby can just come back and play the way Holtby knows he can, I just don't see how Carolina wins. I think Ovi's hungry for another cup. I don't think they liked the way they went out last year to Carolina, and they're going to come back with vengeance. So I think Washington ultimately comes out victorious with that one. All right, back to the West with the Western Conference semifinals. With I believe it's St. Louis Blues and the Edmonton Oilers. This is an interesting matchup. We have the former Cup champions and the two best players in the world right now. Or 2 of the best players in the world right now. I wouldn't exactly say they are the best players in the world right now. One team is, again, it's a lot like the Dallas series. One team is extremely offensive when the Edmonton Oilers, and the other is extremely defensive. But the Blues can play any game you need them to. And I think that's key to a victory. Though Connor McDavid and Leon Draisaitl are there, I just don't think the team has what it takes to play defensively. I barely pushed them on into the 3rd round. So because of that, I think the St. Louis Blues are going to go on. They're just they've been the better team all season. In terms of the Western Conference, they have a better defense. They have better depth. I think their depth has even gotten a little better this year. I don't know. I can't think of a reason why the Oilers would win. I'm going to say St. Louis in 6. I'll give the Oilers the benefit of the doubt. They're not a bad team. I just don't think that their goaltending or the defense can hold the St. Louis Blues. I don't think they can play I can't say that they can't play the hard knock game because we saw the Calgary Edmonton series this season. They'll be emotionally there. It'll be a rough series. I just don't think they have what it takes to beat the St. Louis Blues. On to the next series: the Vegas Golden Knights and the Colorado Avalanche. The Colorado Avalanche is the best team on this part of the bracket. The Golden Knights are very, very good. Don't get me wrong. Again, I question the Avalanche's goaltending. Their offense is solid, their defense is solid, but their goaltending, I don't know if that'll be able to hold up. Grubauer is a decent goaltender. I'll give him that. And so is the guy whose name escapes me. That was backup. But I don't think they're as good as Marc-Andre Fleury. And the Golden Knights were the best team in the Pacific this year. I don't know if that means all that much, but they were. This is a tough one. I think ultimately it will come down to goaltending. Both teams can score like no one's ever scored before. Like I said earlier, the Avalanche beat the Predators 9-4. Marc-Andre Fleury is better than Pecorino was. So, because of that, I think... And again, the Vegas has a lot to... They're back with a vengeance, because last year they got screwed out of the game. Out of the last game. They definitely should have closed it out earlier than that, but, they still think they got screwed over. They will always think that. It's hard to talk someone out of it. So because of that, I think Vegas, because of the way they're coming in with a vengeance, and because I don't think the Avalanche can keep up with them in scoring, but I think Marc-Andre Fleury is much better than Philip Grubauer, and so I believe the Golden Knights they'll be the better team because Marc-Andre Fleury's back there, and so I think it's going to be the Golden Knights who move on to play the St. Louis Blues. So as I'm sitting here editing this, it came upon me that I'd mentioned earlier that the Robin Lehner had gone from Chicago to Vegas, giving Vegas the tandem of Marc-Andre Fleury and Robin Lehner. They out-goaltend Pavel Francouz and Phil Grubauer all day and every day. That's probably where this conversation should have ended. 100% Vegas, all the way. All right, so this is probably what it should have been from the start for the last couple years. The Pittsburgh Penguins taking on the Boston Bruins. They've had series before, and they have been brutal. And this one will be just as brutal because both of these teams won it very badly. The Bruins, I think, won it more than the Penguins. And the Penguins, with the way they fell off this season, I don't think they have what it takes to beat the Bruins. Their goaltending isn't as... Tuukka Rask has just been playing out of his mind this season. Halak and Rask have been an amazing duo. Matt Murray has been up and down this season. Tristan Jarry has been pretty good this season. I don't think either of them are as good as Halak and Rask. Rask obviously playing most of the games here. The offenses can go hand in hand with defenses. The defense on Boston, I think, is better than it is in Pittsburgh. It's led by Zdeno Chara and Charlie McAvoy. I think they're better than Chris Letang. Pittsburgh lost a player. He's out for the next couple months. I think it's 5 months because he just had surgery. So I think Boston moves on again. It's hard to not see them move on. I think they're better than Pittsburgh in every way. But I think it's going to be in 7. I think it's going to be a 7-game series. I think they're going to beat the shit out of each other. But I think ultimately Boston's going to beat Pittsburgh. Just because their goaltending's better and their defense is better. It's a rematch of the 2018 Eastern Conference Finals, the Washington Capitals and the Tampa Bay Lightning. Both have a reason to go for this, and both of them need this. Tampa Bay needs one. Their window's closing. They need to win a cup, and so is Washington's. Ovi wants another one. I'm sure the whole entire team wants another one, but Ovi just wants to get there one more time so he can have his 2 cups and just confirm even more how great he is. Tampa Bay, they were sucker punched last year and they didn't even see it coming. So I think that they have something to prove. If we're going to go compare defenses and offenses with each other, I think Tampa Bay has the edge on offense. I think they're a little bit deeper. Both are extremely deep teams. the Capitals did just lose Brendan Leipzig, who was having a pretty decent season for them. He was at least a big tough guy on the team. It's tough. It's a tough one to call. The defense, Carlson leads one and Hedman leads the other. I think Tampa Bay might have a little bit of a deeper defense with Sergachev and McDonough and Shattenkirk. I believe they make up the rest of their top four. Gudis is on Washington. Oh man, and then it's going to come down to goaltending again. Vasilevsky started off the season not so great, and he finished up into the quarantine pretty strong. Holtby has not been great all season, but Samsonov has been pretty good. Everything I just said, I think I've convinced myself that Tampa Bay is going to win this series, and it's going to be in 7. It's going to be a bloody mess at the end of it. So Tampa Bay is going to move on to play the Boston Bruins in the Eastern Conference Final. Back to the Western Conference Final, the Golden Knights will take on the St. Louis Blues, where I believe the Golden Knights think they should have been last year anyway. Ooh, this is a tough one to call. Both goaltenders are pretty great. I think the Blues have a better defense, and the Golden Knights have a better offense, but the Blues can roll any way you want them to. But I think this run, after taking last year's run, I think St. Louis is I think they're going to fold this year. Marc-Andre Fleury's and the Golden Knights have something to prove. Again, it always comes down to having something to prove. They made it here in 2018, and they made it to the Stanley Cup, and they didn't win. And I know each one of those players wants to get back there and prove that they can win. So, with that, and after the run that the Blues had, and I think they're going to be a much rougher. The Central Division is always much rougher. Because of the rough ride they had, I think the Golden Knights are going to come out on top of this series. I don't think they're going to play as many games as the Blues will. I think because of the run that they took last year, the Blues are going to be much more tired. Well, it's difficult to measure that because there was a stoppage here in the middle of the season. But I mean, it does. You have to take that into account that they did go on this long run last year, even though there was this extended amount of rest. They're still a little bit more beaten up than the Golden Knights are. I think they will be after the Winnipeg series, and I think they will be after the Oilers series. Both of those teams can play hard and they can play heavy. With the heavy style that the Blues play and just trying to keep up with the Golden Knights who play a quick, speedy game, I just think the Golden Knights are going to come out on top, as they did against the Winnipeg Jets
in 2018.
So that's the Western half of your Stanley Cup Final. Western Conference champions being the Vegas Golden Knights. On the other side, we have the Tampa Bay Lightning and the Boston Bruins. A series that has been played in the second round. 2 seasons ago it was played. The Tampa Bay Lightning beat the Boston Bruins and then lost in the Eastern Conference Finals. This is just based on the last game these two teams played against each other. This is going to be an all-out war. Both of these teams have been to the Stanley Cup Finals in the last 5 years. I believe the Tampa Bay Lightning lost to the Blackhawks in 2015, and then the Bruins lost in 2013 and in 2019 after winning in 2011. The Lightning have not won since 2004. This team is supposed to be one of the best teams. They tied a regular season record last year and got swept. The Bruins, like I said, have lost 2 Stanley Cups. Alright. So, I don't remember where I last left off because my camera died again. And then I went and ate lunch. So, I think I was talking about the Lightning and the Bruins. I think the Bruins are going to win. So it's the Bruins and Golden Knights in the Stanley Cup Final. And just with the way the Bruins have been playing all season, I think they finally going to win the cup again, for the first time in 9 years. You know, their defense is better than the Golden Knights. Their goaltending has been better than the Golden Knights all season. I think it'd be a really good, hard-fought match. I think probably 6 games. I think the Bruins take down the Golden Knights. They're just, I don't know. They're a team on a mission this year, and I think they're going to be real. I think, I don't know who can beat them. To be honest, clearly, as I've stated here, the Golden Knights will lose a second Stanley Cup Final, And I think next year they'll be back for revenge. So, yeah, I think that's it. So if you like this video, give me a thumbs up. If you want to see more, don't forget to subscribe. And probably maybe have another video out this week. And on Sunday I'll be streaming. What? I'm not sure yet. So, alright. This could bite me in the ass, isn't it?